Okay, reviewing the homework from yesterday. Absolute value of x equals 5. That gives you x equals 5. And then you have the other option of x equals negative 5. Absolute value less than 3. That gives you x less than 3. And it's a less than sign. So, and x is greater than negative 3. See how negative 3 is less than x? Number 3. X greater than 1. It's a greater sign, greater. So, or x is less than negative 1. Number 4. X is less than or equal to 6. It's a less than. So then you have x is between negative 6 and 6. Absolute value greater than 10. It's going to be 10. Or, because it's greater, x is less than negative 10. Number 6. X is greater than 2. Or x is less than negative 2. Number 7, x is less than 9. It's a less than. So x is bigger than negative 9. Remember, the sign equals the bigger number. Absolute value of x is greater than or equal to 10. It gives us x is greater than or equal to 10. Or x is less than or equal to negative 10. Number 9 is a less than. Tells me it's going to be an and. X is less than 4.5 and greater than negative 4.5. And then absolute value of x greater than 1/4 or less than negative 1/4. So this one should have been pretty easy for you, especially if you're looking at the notes. What does absolute value mean? Absolute value means it's always going to be a positive number. Good way to remember what absolute value is, it's a distance. You can't ever go a negative distance. If I walk out my door and I go to the right 3 steps, I went 3 steps. If I go out my door and I go to the left 3 steps, I still went 3 steps. So it can't be I went negative 3 steps. That doesn't work. 5-4, absolute value inequalities, day 2. Solve and graph the following. Absolute value of x is greater than 10. So we know it's an or because it's a greater than 10, or x is less than negative 10. Zero, negative 10, 10, open circle going right, open circle going left. Guess what? We did this yesterday. This is a less than, so it's just an and question. With ands, remember that they're going to be shading in the middle. So if that's 0, 6, and negative 6. Open circle goes this direction up to negative 6 and stops. Now you'll see people do it with the going this direction with an arrow and then this direction with an arrow. I'll show you what I mean. Then the second one starts like this, goes this way, and then they draw a line in and do squiggles in the middle. It's the same thing. Mine's just a little more efficient. You know, my way is always better. Okay. Here's a question for you. Is a greater than problem always or? And is a less than problem always and? Yesterday we discussed that it was always going to be that way. Not sometimes, always. As long as something happens, as long as your absolute value of x comes first, it's always going to be a and if it's a less than. In this case, our absolute value of x does not come first. So we have to put it first. If you always put it first, that's going to make it so that you can tell whether it's an and or an or right off the bat. Now it's greater than, and you know that it's going to be an or. Greater than 5 or less than negative 5. Today's objective, you will be able to solve an inequality with an absolute value. Hey, that was yesterday's objective too. Example 1. Absolute value of x is greater than negative 5. Let's stop and think about the question. When is an absolute value of a number going to be greater than a negative number? When absolute value is always positive, right? So it's always going to be greater than a negative number. So as soon as you see this, you know what the answer is. These are all real numbers. For part B, absolute value is less than negative 5. When is an absolute value going to be less than a negative number? Absolute value is always positive, so it can never be less than that. So your answer is going to be no solution. And that's really the complicated part about today. Remembering that if it's greater than a negative number, it's all real numbers. And if it's less than a negative number, it's no solution. And then we're also going to have the type that kind of flip on you. Example 2. When is the absolute value of x greater than 0? What's greater than 0? For when x is 1 and negative 1 and 0.1 and negative 0.1. So it's greater than 0 as long as x is not equal to 0. Does that make sense? Because no matter what we put in here, as long as it's not 0, the absolute value of that number would end up being greater than 0. Because it always has to be positive. So instead of saying like every number except 0, you just say x cannot equal 0. Then that tells you that it could be anything else. When can the absolute value of x be less than 0? That would mean that it's a negative, which is automatically no solution. C's a little harder. When can absolute value of x be less than or equal to 0? Well, it can never be less than 0, just like we talked about here. When could it be equal to 0? What number could we put in for x to make it equal to 0? Your answer would be x equals 0. If you put the number 0 in here, absolute value of 0 is just 0. And 0 is equal to 0. When is it greater than or equal to 0? That is all real numbers. Because we could put a 0 in, that would work. 0 is greater than or equal to 0. Put a negative 1 in, absolute value of the negative 1 is 1. That's greater than or equal to 0. Okay? So today was all about showing you the tricky situations that come up in your lessons. And now I want you to do the 6 U tries. So I'm going to pause the video, go through it. Should be a lot of pauses whenever we're doing this lesson in class. Absolute value of x equals 4. Your solution for that would be x equals 4 and x equals negative 4. Number 2, absolute value of x less than or equal to 8. So remember, it's less than, so it's an and. Less than or equal to 8. And greater than or equal to negative 8. So it's between negative 8 and 8. If we're graphing that, we have 0, negative 8, 8, close parentheses, or close circles, not parentheses, and draw in between. Number 3, absolute value of x greater than negative 2. When is it bigger than negative 2? Well, it's always positive, so that would be all real numbers. When would it be less than 0? Never. So that's no solution. Number 5, greater than 5.2. That's an or because it's greater. So smart coming up with that. X is greater than 5.2 or x is less than negative 5.2. If we graph that, 0, 5.2, and negative 5.2. So that would be smaller than that and greater than that. And last one, number 6, when would it be less than a negative 6? That would be no solution. Can't be smaller than the negative. Absolute value is always positive. Okay. Good luck on your homework tonight. I think you're going to do great. On these homeworks, some days I might have a video posted that gives you the answers to the homeworks before you even do the homework. But if you're not actually doing the homework, you're going to get crushed on your test. I promise you that. So make sure you are actually doing your homework. All right, guys.